Professor Green and then Dr. Morris. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
And we've been known to spoil a party or two, right? Because of that, in all kinds of contexts. When I was invited to speak at Duke Law School on Public Domain Day in 2020, when a lot of works came into the public domain, I wrote a poem about the public domain, which I presented, and it showed that the public domain is a wonderful concept. However, as applied to African American artists, has not been. And so, one of the reasons why I wanted to be involved in this conference, and I'm glad that Nicole invited me, is that on the one hand, and I was interviewed by Bloomberg about NFTs and how African American artists, particularly, and music artists, are flocking to the NFT space. And there's a simple reason why they are, because we have a music industry complex that basically operates on a gangster basis and extracts wealth from African Americans. And I've been writing about this for 20 years, over 20 years, right, on this. So I want this to be the great party that it could be. But on the other hand, I look at other promises that were made of technologies that would empower African American artists and didn't pan out. I look at the fact that there's still a massive digital divide between the resources of African Americans and other groups in society. And I wonder, one, will a lot of people miss the boat? And two, do they want to be on the boat? Because are the protections in place for their works not to be expropriated? The history of African Americans in music is of expropriation, of them losing their works, of being appropriated. Now, this is supposed to be a secure blockchain, so that would take out some of that risk, but I'm not necessarily persuaded. That's why I asked Lewis, did you retain the rights to your work? Other issues that I think in this space, as artists are creating NFTs, say in music, are they registering their copyrights? Do they realize that if they don't have a copyright registration, they can't enforce their rights, period? They can do a DMAC takedown, but if they do the takedown and they don't have a registration certificate, that's it. It's the end of the story. The thing's going to go back up. So I just look at this and I see tons of issues. And I don't say this to be negative or to be a naysayer, but before we invite particularly marginalized communities into this space, we better be damn sure that we're not going to replicate what this happened since 1920 in the beginning of the recording industry, which was launched by two African-American women, Bessie Smith and Mamie Smith, neither of which ended up with anything at the end of the day. I have now concluded my opening statement.
I'm not letting you get off that easy. No, that's right. That's right. It's like you dropped the mic and there was no mic. Like, you're the first person
Dr. Green is available.
Zoom.
Dr. Green is available for all the attendees to hire as a consultant as they're building out these startups and writing their governance documents and considering this, right? And lobbying Congress. So I'm going to definitely call Dr. Green whenever we have a government outreach campaign we're thinking about related to this stuff. So thank you, Professor Morris, for inviting all of these panelists so that we could hear.
No, Professor Green is the truth on all things copyright for me. I go nowhere without asking him a question in email. But you know what? You're exactly right. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to convene you all together, because I think a lot of folks are getting into the space, particularly people who are new to tech, but they see this as a huge payday, that we have to still remember the underlying sort of doctrinal law, particularly copyright law in this instance, that if you don't file and register your copyright for some of this work, you're not really fully protecting yourself. And I actually echo your concerns in terms of marginalized communities that will be taken advantage of, right? So everyone should retain their rights. If we've got folks in the audience who are looking at getting into this NFT artist space. I loved how Luis broke it down between collectors and artists. It's perfect. I'm not creating anything. I'm going to be on the collector side. But as the creators, you all really need to consult with someone about getting your copyright protected before you tinker around too far and head down a path of no return. All right, Dr. Morris, you had your hand up. You're so patient. Thank you, my dear.
Oh, listen, I've been in here learning. Thank you for having me. I have so many things, but I'm going to just touch on a few, and I'm not going to go so deep. I'm just going to, keep it light. So I am by training a chemist, right? So I have worked as a polymer chemist in undergraduate, a biomolecular chemist as a graduate student. I have worked with different materials. I've worked in sustainability. I have worked, you name it, I've almost done it in chemistry. So when I think about the sustainability piece, that hasn't really hit the scientific world. There is not really a green process for mining. In lots of countries now, as we're in this COVID crisis, energy crises, especially since it's been happening, a lot of minting has happened in European countries, small European countries. They have started to shut it down. So then how does that really threaten the integrity of the blockchain? So if you are building over the blockchain and now they are shutting down because energy usage is too high, then how then does that affect what you've already built or used that they have? I mean, they really don't have any control over when their country says, you can no longer mine. So maybe it's just a mining portion of it, but we talk about wanting to, not have so many hands on regulating this process, but at the same time, we still need some types of regulation in place. And so it's kind of like an oxymoron of ideas in terms of what is needed. I've always said that chemists need to kind of jump on this in terms of new materials. So like what type of new materials can we be using, new chips, different, right now they use a certain type of silicone wafer in these chips in these headsets, but the way that it's going to be more affordable, more accessible, be able to hold more information is if there's a new material. And so like anybody out there doing material science, nanotechnology type of work, this is an opportunity to kind of find your niche in that space. When I think about NFTs, having worked or having graduated from a historically Black college university, Clark Atlanta University as an undergrad, moving on to Emory for graduate school, but now being back at an HBCU, Morehouse College, all Black, all male, alma mater of Martin Luther King Jr., I think about lack of exposure for our students. So students haven't really jumped into NFTs. Some of them have, some of them haven't. But a lot of that, when I thought about like why is it that the Black community hasn't really like jumped into this space like I thought that they would? And if you think about how NFTs work a lot like how the art world works. Like it's holding on to art and finding the value in it and letting it appreciate and then reselling it. It's kind of like having that type of asset. There's no Mona Lisas around here. I'm just to be clear, like there's not, I mean, they take art appreciation or the history of art, but they don't really understand how it applies to their everyday life because that's not a part of the world that we really live in, right? So an NFT to them also is similar. It's like still trying to learn a process, whereas other people have kind of the jump because they understand how art appreciates and how it's passed down. And so they've been in this world. That hasn't been the case for many, especially all like 60% of our students are first generation, college educated students. That is not the normal. Generational wealth being passed down through art pieces is not what they know. And so the exposure to how art appreciates, and then that would help give them the advantage and exposure of an appreciation of NFTs. And I don't know if that appreciation will come when it's already too late, Like,
yeah, no, that's a great point.